imagine a world where the US says, okay, we think Iran's being a bad actor and that we want to go spend X amount of money to go set them, teach them a lesson or set them straight. And so we're gonna impose a one-time, tax across the flat tax across the whole population. You know, let's call it 10%. You know, and that everybody gets to vote on that to see, okay, 10% of your holdings
Your
is going to
Bitcoin.
get, whatever it is, doesn't matter, right? Just imagine the scenario like when like 10% is going to be taken from you and for this purpose. It's like, and who's in agreement with that?
Yeah.
Like, and imagine trying to sell it politically. It's
Yep.
like everybody be like, no,
Yeah.
let's the answer is no.
Yep.
It's like we're not going to do that. um, so it would have to be more like, hey, Martians are invading. We need to take care of half of everybody's, savings to like, basically not be exterminated by these alien, these outer space aliens. Uh, and there's like no other way. Yeah, okay, well, we'll do it, but
Which is a
but
possibility. We might see
which is
some sort of fake alien invasion. They've already admitted, the
right.
governments have said that, aliens exist, which was a huge
Yeah,
blowover. No one really even cared. That just goes to show the trust in government is super low because they come out and say, yeah, we have aliens. We have fact that they exist, whatever they said. And people are like, who cares?
yeah. Did you see the report about there was some rocket launch that was designed to like go and intercept a meteorite and see if it could be nudged out of its or out of its trajectory,
Oh, no,
and
but I would imagine it could be.
that they now I saw this recently. I don't remember the particulars, but it's like from what I was reading, it's like, yeah, they were able to like show that they could nudge a meteorite or an asteroid, I guess, enough such that if they knew it was going to like hit the Earth, they could like nudge it enough so that it would like skip off the atmosphere or miss us entirely. I don't know, which is like kind of a great story that removes, maybe in a lot of people's minds, removes the like, oh, well, we don't have to worry about that cataclysm now. We can like, take that one off the list. So you got like, worldwide, epidemic or, getting hit by an asteroid or like the sun blowing up or, whatever. The polar shift, there's all sorts of like, calamitous,
Yeah.
scenarios that they talk about. But I mean, but you're in terms of war, and I think one of the interesting side effects potentially of this war is that the kind of unmasking of the influence of the petrodollar system
Yeah.
in terms of energy consumption and pricing is getting kind of front and center.
Yeah.
I was looking at an article this morning. It was showing that there's really four different prices of oil now, that depending on the market it's serving and the mechanism and the transport costs and risks, like, and how much is dependent, like, in each jurisdiction. So they're saying like the price for China has gone quite a ways up. Prussian Russia is different because they can produce a bunch. China relies on Middle East. U.S., while we tend to buy a lot of imported oil and have in the past, we still actually have quite a bit of our own. Again, how much of this stuff is like fake or not fake, it's hard to know. But as a price discovery mechanism, the whole situation seems to be interesting. And I wonder if that price discovery mechanism will start like showing up in other places, right? It's like, oh, well, now that X costs more to transport, now the cost of X product is going to be at, more or less or whatever. So we'll see. We'll see where this goes. But it's an interesting kind of macroeconomic study, and the whole like, oh, well, we'll be done by next week. It's like, how
Yeah.
many times have we heard we'll be done by next week? It's like, don't look at Iraq or Kuwait. And like now that there's more, I guess, oil field properties on fire and destroyed, it's like reminding me of like, oh, like all the oil well fires that they had to put out back in the Kuwait thing. It's like, man, are we just going to repeat this again?
Yeah, I mean, Bitcoin just
So,
gives the power back to the individual. If you look
yeah.
at this war with Iran, Pentagon comes out and estimates the cost that the U.S. spent 11 billion in the first 6 days of the conflict or the war, whatever you want to call it. How many dollars are going to come from just this central authority with their own decision making? They get to say, this is good enough. Let's create dollars, inflate dollars. Therefore, all the goods and services go up in price. Yeah, we like it with Bitcoin, but it's a silly game that we're playing where a central entity gets to create it for free and everyone else, we have to go trade our time and energy for that same dollar currency.
That's right. There was a really good write-up of this this last week or so. I'll try to find it here. We're talking. I sent it to a friend. I thought it was so good. So let me try to find it.
Yeah, so I think we just need more. It sucks to say, but it's like more pain. People have to actually have skin in the game. They have to actually feel the pain of inflation. I know a lot of people are, but you got to feel it more. And then not only that, you have to connect the dots and figure out what's the cause of it, right? It's one thing to experience pain. Okay, that's step one. You're looking for a solution, but then you can be tricked into a solution. Like, well, here's the solution, and guess what it is? Stable coins. Now, the dollar sucks. Now, for every $100, it's worth one stable coin. So these stable coins are worth 100 times more than the US dollar. It's the new US dollar, Trump dollar. Who knows what they're going to call it? But
Yeah.
if it's not decentralized, permissionless, no one controls it, provably backed by energy, it requires energy to create. Henry Ford came out and said something back in the day about energy money would stop wars. And here we are.
Yeah, he did.
And here we are. We have it right now.
Exactly.
Bitcoin is energy money.
Yeah. I found the thing. Let me share it quick.
All right.
So I thought this was pretty interesting take. So it comes from 1031. They're like a Bitcoin venture capital fund.
Okay.
Also associated with Marty Bent and the TFTC, the Truth for the Commoner site. So if you want, and I'm not going to go to Odell. Yeah, he's involved in this as well. But basically, they make the case of this, right? That you got corporations. They have their own equity, and then they are kind of the engine of them is corporate debt, and that as countries go, they have sovereign debt, and then to pay for that, see, corporations have to like go make money, sell products and stuff. That's where their equity comes from. They actually have to do something. Whereas countries, they just creates more fiat, right? And but the point of this is that while not a direct dampener on what governments can do in terms of expanding their sovereign debt, Bitcoin does kind of act as a kind of suppressing force, and through the stable coin, because for one, stable coins are one-to-one reserve. So unlike commercial banking, they're not fractionalized. So you don't have the multiplication effect, and through other reasons that they do kind of, and it gets into here in the details, but it gets into kind of a dampening sort of effect. So even though Bitcoin is not like the end all, like a force that governs everything yet, it is starting to apply a kind of a dampening effect on what governments can do. And I thought that was kind of interesting.
I understand the premise, but I don't agree with it. And the fatal flaw to this idea is that Bitcoin's 21 million. It's backed by the consensus. It's backed by energy, right? You can't just make a Bitcoin. You have to mine a Bitcoin. You have to create the energy to get the Bitcoin, right? The energy is what is the gatekeeper of the Bitcoin. You got to spend, you got to mine. Got to have your computer throwing darts and guessing these numbers, which requires machines and energy. So that's what keeps the Bitcoin pegged to the 21 million, the consensus plus the mining.
Yep.
So what keeps the peg between the stablecoin and the Bitcoin? My word, your database. There's no energy mechanism that ties it and bounds it to energy to the real world. That's one of the amazing inventions of Bitcoin. So there will be no peg. How can you make sure it's one-to-one?
Yeah, there's all of these things, unless it's a bearer instrument. We talk about this over and over, and I think it's worth reinforcing for the folks that just haven't heard it enough. Unless you hold it and can control it, there's some amount of trust me, bro, involved. That's what we call a counterparty and a counterparty risk. So if you're buying an ETF share, a Bitcoin ETF, it's like you're not buying Bitcoin. You're buying a percentage of ownership of a financial asset that claims it has equal amount of Bitcoin to support all the shares that's been created behind it, that they control, is custodied. Well, even most of them don't even custody it themselves. They use another party to custody it, right? So it's not even that, that they can just dip into their private wallet and give it to you if they needed to. They have to go to another party. Every time you have another party, you have a little more risk. And these risks all build up on top of each other. And when you kind of keep expanding the number of parties involved, and if you start saying things like, oh, well, I'm going to take my shares of the BlackRock ETF and I'm going to use them to collateralize, another leveraged bet on something else. Well, then you've just created more leverage, more derivative, and it just gets crazy. So it's like, I'm with you in that it's like we need to get away from any influence where being able to make up stuff out of nothing with no energy, no expenditure, no effort whatsoever, which is the position the central banks have, and to some extent the commercial banks as well, then you're never going to have accountability. And this is where the whole Bitcoin fixes this mantra comes from. I know people sling it around like, oh, here's a topic, and then the road answer is, oh, Bitcoin fixes this. Well, it seems a bit kind of loosely applied, but if you really think about it, it does rein in accountability, and it does kind of fix it. Now, when people say that, they're kind of envisioning the end game. Yeah. In a lot of ways, and there's a lot of messiness between where we are now and where that is, and maybe in our lifetime we'll see it. And my hope is that this switch or transition will happen, and I'll get to enjoy the other side of what it looks like for a while at least.
Yeah. It's just, I guess, in a high functioning society, we're gonna have to have some trust, right? It makes sense. But trusting strangers is hard. You might trust friends. I might trust you a little bit, might trust family. Mm-hmm. That makes sense. But people that don't know you, trusting them, what even is trust? Why would I trust them? Why would they even care about me? It doesn't make much sense. We're all going to look out for us and those around us, which is just human nature, and that's fine. So the least amount of trust, the better.